Welcome back to Coffee and Tea with CarrieVee. I am CarrieVee, your biggest fan. You're all around. Well, you're my favorite person in the world. And on Coffee and Tea with CarrieVee, we talk all things communication, leadership, confidence, clarity, and life. And joining us today is Jeannie Wickert. I got to meet Jeannie through different networking events that I have been a part of, networking groups that I have joined. And she's such a cool person, amazing sense of humor. And she's going to share with us her insight and her wisdom and her amazing personality today. So, Jeannie, welcome. Welcome to Coffee and Tea with CarrieVee.
I thank you so much. It's so great to be here. I'm really excited to be talking with you today.
I'm excited to have you talking with us today. So tell us, Jeannie, what is lighting up your world right now? What's exciting you? What's awesome?
So so I am in a current journey right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it a little mini midlife crisis, just a little one.
Okay.
Which I think in your mid 40s is not unusual to happen.
I would agree.
Where you're like, all right, I've done the one path and it kind of comes to a natural end. And you're like, well, what do I want to do with the rest of my life?
Yes.
That is a much harder question. Well, actually, it's always been a hard question. I remember when I was going to college and I was like, it feels very unfair that I need to make a decision now at 17.
Oh, so unfair.
But I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know crap. You know?
None of us did.
And kind of trying to figure out how my past life will aid in my future life.
Yes.
And kind of putting them all together. Because I've had a very unusual career trajectory, I would say, which is also really very much, it was a career that encompassed my whole life.
Yeah.
So I spent 18 years touring with Disney Live and Disney on Ice. I did a year with Ringling Brothers Bar and Bailey Circus. So I spent 18 years being in a different city every week.
Which sounds absolutely amazing to me.
I mean, it was amazing, and I learned so much from it. But it's trying to take all those experiences from like almost a non-real world and shoehorn them and figure out how they can affect like what is now like what my parents say my grown-up job.
Oh, your grown-up job, yes.
Yeah, because they still never thought that, because it was a circus and it was theater and it was fun. And I go to South America and Europe and that was just like a fun job. I'm like, yeah, but it's still a job.
Yes. Yes.
And so like there's some really cool practical things from there I've learned. Like we were just talking about your Pal shoes.
Yes.
There's wonderful things called heel grips. They're little rubber things that go in the back of your shoe and they will snug it right up and you'll be good to go.
I'm so excited to hear this.
It's beautiful. So those years of wardrobe, like there's so many things that you learn in there that are so applicable to life outside of theater. Because you're dealing with people, because you're dealing with people in a very vulnerable state because you're helping them change clothes. And you're very vulnerable when you're just standing there in your underwear in front of someone. So you have to kind of be sensitive, but there's also important things you have to talk about. So you learn to diffuse a lot of situations with laughter and make things more, just to make people more comfortable.
Yeah.
I found that to be really effective in all levels of communication and professional, personal things like that, is that if all parties are comfortable and know that they can talk to each other, you can be much more effective when you're talking about things because you're making an environment where they feel comfortable asking questions.
Oh, that's powerful.
It really is like something that a performer told me once was that they always knew no matter how busy I was, I would make time for them and I would listen to them. And they found that really good because like there would be times during a new build where I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off with my notebook, but I would still take time and talk to them and help them sort out their situation. And that was really a big thing. And that really was a big thing later when I became a production manager, that my crew knew that my door was open.
Yes.
And that really makes a difference in how you lead people and how people will view you as a leader, and what power you have as a leader.
Yes. Yes. A true leader and not a boss or manager, if you
Yeah.
will. A true leader puts the people they are leading
Mhm.
number one, as if they're walking around with tens over their head, right? Because they're the most valuable person in the world.
Yeah.
And I still see you doing this.
Mhm.
In every situation in which I see you putting people above all else and valuing a human being. Where do you think you learned that from? Where do you think that innate, I need to make people know how important they are? Where do you think that came from?
I think well, I think part of it's just kind of my natural way of dealing with people. The other thing is, so my degree is in arts management. So it's a theater degree with, well, it's basically a business degree with theater thrown into it.
Yeah.
And there was one class that was management, and we're going over the different types of power, how you can have power of authority, power of being an expert, and just all the different ones. And one of them was power of influence, I think, where people like you. So they do things. So you become a leader, and you have a power just because people like you. And I'm like, that's the kind of leader, that's the kind of boss that I would want to be. That
Yes.
my staff and my coworkers want to do more for me because we're a team. They like me, and not in like a people pleasing kind of
Right.
way. Some, but in a we lead together. It's a team, and I
Yeah.
think that really resonated with me, and that kind of grew with me over the years. So
That's beautiful. So it's like a reciprocation. I
yeah,
value you, and
mhm,
with that comes the return on your investment of valuing.
yeah, and it really helps build trust between you and the people that you're leading,
Yeah.
um, because you have a better relationship with them,
Yes.
and it's things where you're like, well, normally I wouldn't, but well, it's Jeannie. I can't tell her no. You know,
I think a lot of people feel like that.
It's like, well, thank you.
The comment I hear a lot is Jeannie is so fun. She is so fun to hang out with. And your smile is captivating. I know that everybody I've talked to that knows you can't
Mhm.
wait to be in your aura and in your presence. So tell us how all of that works into what you are doing now then. What was the transition out of theater into, I'm not going to call it real life because I think both are real life. They're just different. They just took on different forms, but definitely a huge transition. So how did that come about?
Oh gosh, it was huge. So here's the thing about touring theater. There's kind of like time breaks where most people who start touring right out of high school or right out of college because it's a young person's game. Because
Mhm.
you don't own it, you don't mind having everything you own in two suitcases when you're young.
Yeah.
And people stay 1 year, 3 years, 7 years, and then if you stay longer than 7, you're just there till you rot. You know? And what I found was as I got older, the people I worked with all stayed the same age, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
It
So,
does.
do you remember the movie Dazed and Confused and Matthew McConaughey's character? And he has this really line where he loves high school girls because they always stay the same age.
Yes.
Well,
I've
yeah,
read about it. Yes.
yeah, it did not age well, but it does kind of reflect like so as time went on, as a 40-year-old woman, I had less and less in common with my coworkers and the people that I was managing. And while it didn't really affect my work, in fact, I think it was really good for my work because I think managing a younger generation and having to adapt to them makes you very adaptable.
Yeah.
But it really took a toll on my social life and my mental health, just
Mm.
because I wasn't with peers.
Yes.
It was hard to find that. So I was like, I need a change. I'm really unhappy. I have to do something.
Hmm.
So I had not known David Kipper, my current boss, because he used to tour as well.
Okay.
So that's how we met, and we were friends and had worked together for decades. for I think we knew each other for a good 10 years before I got off the road. And he was building he had taken over his dad's company and he had been building it and he needed help and he needed someone to kind of think outside the box. So he talked me into coming here, and I've been here for 7 years. And while I don't dislike it, I don't find it as fulfilling as I found theater. So now I'm working towards my master's degree to become a librarian. So I'm going into career number 3.
Which is so exciting. Okay, so one, I'm hearing that in this there was a lack of community from the standpoint of having peers. I mean, I'm a huge believer in having friends of all ages.
Mm-hmm.
And having friends of all ages, not all one age. So I'm hearing that lack of community there. And then I'm hearing also this career number 3 thing, which is fascinating and wonderful, because I think we are taught that we have to have one career only, and we need to stay in that career forever. And that is something, certainly in my generation, that's what we were taught, and all through college. Be careful of the job you choose, because that's it for the rest of your life. I love that you are showing us that we can have multiple careers.
You really can. And there was 2 inspirations for this. One was my parents came and visited, and I'm trying to convince them to come and move out here because they live in Seattle right now. And I'm like, that is too far away. I'm like, you're in your 70s. You're almost 80. I would like you closer, please. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And they asked me where I saw myself in 5 years. And I was like, I don't know. Think about this more. And then I turned 45.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, well, and I realized I have at least another 20 years of work in my future, at least 20.
Yeah.
And 20 is long enough for a good career.
Yes, it is.
So I was like, and I don't see myself doing what I'm doing for the next 20 years. So let's think about it. What do we got to do?
Yes. Oh, I think we need to immortalize that phrase, Jeannie. 20 years is long enough for a good career.
It is. Mm-hmm.
What a great viewpoint. Everybody latch on to that. When you are thinking, I don't know, am I too old to make a career change? You are never too old or too young. If Francis Scott Key wrote, 100 years ago, or maybe it's not that long, but years ago, decades ago, said you are never too old, or in my case, too young to get out there and do what it is you want to do. That's not verbatim. Don't look it up and say I quoted that wrong. I'm not trying to quote it. I'm trying to give an idea. Okay. But I love that you brought that out. That you should write a book with that title.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly.
Yeah, because that's like at first I was like, then I was like, everyone was always so surprised by how long I stayed on the road. It was 18 years. And I honestly almost stayed an extra 2 years just to make it an even 20. But I was like, well, if that was an impressive amount of time, then 18 years in the future would be just as much of an impressive amount of time. It's not like you get a job and, and I knew I had to leave, because if I didn't leave, I saw people on the road and I was like, and they just kind of get lonely and bitter. And I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yep.
So I was like, it's time.
Yeah.
And then, here was a great landing place, because I had to it was quite the adjustment, because everything I owned fitting in 2 suitcases. So I'd never had to clean I went right from a dorm to a hotel room. So I didn't have to clean anything. I didn't have real world was not you didn't have the kind of real world experiences. So I was dealing with a lot of things at 40 that most people do when they're 22. I'm like, wait, how do I wash dishes again?
Oh my gosh. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep. I was like, I never owned a car. Because,
Wow. Yeah, you're really blowing my mind right now.
So it's really, it was a very strange experience, because you learn a lot because you're in other cultures. You're meeting a lot of different people. I learned so much from working in South America that I don't know that I would learn anywhere else. But I didn't know how to hadn't owned a car, but I could organize moving places like nobody's business, and I felt very comfortable dealing with people that don't speak English, But
Yes. Wow. So this is not just a career change. This is a major life change into first car, first apartment. First, how long did it take you to adopt your first cat?
Well, I had a cat waiting for me.
Okay. How did that? Let's hear about that. Did you call ahead and say, yes, I'll come work for you as long as you have a cat waiting for me?
So, David's mom, Lorraine, is my best friend.
Yes.
And she had been campaigning to get me off the road.
Got it.
For a long time, I thought she was making David make up a job for me, and he thought she was browbeating me into coming off the road. And so then when we actually sat down together and we realized, oh no, this is something we both want. But as part of her campaign, someone had some cats that were found on Susquehanna Street, and they were living in somebody's basement. And she's like, well, if you come off the road, I found your cat. And she sent me pictures.
That's sneaky.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
That's very sneaky. I mean, brilliant. Brilliant sneaky.
Yeah. So I waited about 4 months before I really brought him home. But because I was like, let's see how this really goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there was a cat waiting for me.
I love this. I love this. Okay, so let's jump then to Jeannie, who is managing a supply store, contractor supplies. Okay, and I want to make sure I word that right. I mean, it's the coolest store. If you ever make it, listen. If you're listening and you live in Thailand, come to Binghamton, New York, and go to Shenango Supply. It's such a cool store. Okay, and if you're local and you've never been, you need to go. So there's your plug for Shenango Supply. Now we're going from something, again, very, very different. What did the jump look like into, I'm going to study to be a librarian? I don't hear that very often. In fact, I'll say once. I've heard it once from you.
Yeah. I knew that I needed to do something that made a difference. Because even though you don't necessarily think of theater as making a difference, when you go out to the shows and watch the kids watching the show, it's very meaningful and they're having a really good time and it's really important to them.
Yes.
So I needed something that I really cared about again. And I've always been a big reader. And then I've always been a big fan of self-education. I thought that was really important.
Yes.
And I was like, well, what do I really care about? I'm like, well, I care about learning and teaching and the whole continuing education thing. And so I was like, you know what? And I just saw an article one day about the different types of librarians. And I was like, oh, huh. And then I called my cousin, who is a guidance counselor in a high school. And I was like, listen, I got a question for you. If I do this, am I going into a dying profession? She's like,
great question.
Yeah, because I was like, are libraries dying? So I'm like, would I be taking on all this debt for nothing?
Yes.
And she's like, absolutely not. It can be used in so many different ways. And just by being an information professional, it's not like you can work in an academic library. There's public libraries. There's special collections. There's also corporate libraries. There's law libraries. So there's a lot of different things that you can go into with the degree. So I was like, oh, okay.
I had no idea.
Well, because the degree is Masters of Libraries and Information Systems.
Okay.
So information systems too. So you're working on databasing and cataloging and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's actually really funny. When I first started to look through this, I was looking at my old employer, for Feld Entertainment, which is Disney on Ice and all that stuff. And they were actually looking for a librarian to come work for them because they have all their archives of all the old circus stuff. So they actually have an on-staff librarian. And I was like, what?
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be so cool if this went full circle?
I know. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So do you see yourself needing to relocate?
I hope not.
Okay, me too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not ruling it out, but the one thing I was able to tell my parents when they wanted to know what my plans were, I was like, I really like living here.
Hmm.
I really like living in in this area, and there's so many colleges in the area. So, um, and my little socialist heart would really like to be a public librarian because I think that's so important,
Yes.
so important.
Yes.
Um, so like
I
that's part of what I'm figuring out now.
and I can see you waking up a waking up the giant of
Mhm.
public libraries. I
Mhm.
think we have lost the allure, and I for one would love to see it come back. I spent my childhood in public libraries. Just
Yeah.
loved it.
What what I'm finding that I'm actually surprisingly passionate about is the emerging adult phase. So when I started talking to people about being a librarian, everyone was like, "Oh, I went there a lot as a kid, and then once I had kids, then I brought them a lot." So there's kind of like a gap in between when people use a library.
Yes.
But there's so many resources there that can be really helpful when you're just trying to figuring out your life for the first time.
Yes.
If you're, like I don't know, I don't have a computer and I need to apply for jobs. Go to the library.
Yes.
Like things like that that I'm like there's so many things that you could do there that can help.
Yeah.
And it really and it was interesting as I was started the journey is that one of the tenets of when libraries were really booming, like back in the 1800s when it was becoming a really big thing, was that it was the idea behind it was that it was the people's library, that it was the people's university,
Yes.
and it was intended to educate immigrants who are people who are new to the country, and that leads to a stronger democracy because people are better educated.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes. And I feel like
I
that's kind of fallen by the wayside,
yes.
and because you make better choices. Like we are stronger as a society the more educated we are.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be a matter of privilege or tuition or things like that. You should be
Yeah.
able to access these things.
Yes. And I won't say I was today years old, but it hasn't been that far in my past where I really realized that you could go to the library to use a computer, that
Hmm.
you could go and pull up these microfiche films, which are the best things in the world. To see these articles from way, way, way long ago. And I imagine everything, maybe it is digitized by now, but
We're working
just
on
yeah, I mean, just being able to find though the my brother is working on family history, and what he has been able to find at the public library is just
that. Yeah,
absolutely amazing.
it's fantastic. Like there's so many things that people don't realize that the library has, that it can be such a useful place to be. And I also think it's one of the things that so one of the things I feel like we're missing as a society nowadays is a third place. So you have work, you have home, do you have a third place where there's no expectations of you?
Yeah.
Where you're like, I'm tired from work. I don't want to go right home and just stare at a wall. I need to do something, but I don't want to necessarily pay to do something.
Yeah,
If you go to a cafe or something, like there are expectations of you for being there.
exactly.
Yeah, you can't
Exactly.
just exist. And in a library, you can go grab a book, sit in a comfy chair, and just hang out.
Yes.
You know,
You
and
just can't fall asleep.
well, actually, in some libraries, you can.
Can you?
Yes. Well, because for a lot of downtown libraries, they kind of become de facto homeless shelters.
Uh-huh.
So that's actually a big part of what we learn in the classes is how to deal with patrons who are experiencing housing insecurity
Hmm.
because
That's beautiful.
because you are going to have them. So there's actually a whole thing. There's a whole course about partnering with if you work at a downtown library to know the shelters, know the people, and work with them to have a safe environment for everyone to be in.
Wow.
Mhm.
There's so much beauty in everything that you're telling me about librarian that I had no idea. I mean, I always thought the librarian was just the person who stamped your book when you left and
Yeah. It's
made
so
sure
much
you brought it back.
like, which for a long time it was that. So that is not an unusual concept. Like the modern librarianship is very different than, because it used to be about protecting the collection,
Hmm.
maintaining the actual collection of what's in the library.
Yeah.
But over time, the focus is more on the users and the patrons at the library.
Mm.
A lot of librarians are now they're adding a social worker to staff.
Ooh.
To help with things like that, or if people are experiencing domestic violence, like a library is a safe place to be. Um, and there's actually been a lot of con- um, conversation within the librarian career of what is appropriate for a librarian and what's not appropriate for a librarian.
Wow.
Some libraries are now carrying Narcan, and which, because that's a
Yes.
very big problem, especially
Yes.
in very urban areas, because again, it's a free space to be in,
Yes.
and things happen. And some librarians are like, I do not feel comfortable with that. That is not my role, and I don't think less of them at all for saying that. And some people are like, I'm here to serve the community.
Wow.
Whatever my community needs is what we're going to do. But it was a whole side of librarianism I hadn't really thought
Yeah.
of into the profession, and we really started to talk about it in class. I was like, I
Yeah.
hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, me too, but it makes perfect sense. And it's a beautiful part. I mean, so I'm coming up on my sixth, no, so I would be completing my sixth decade when I turn 60, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So coming up to that and the years of my childhood that was spent in libraries, either in school or public libraries, the city that I lived near in Delaware, my mom and dad would drop me off at this 4-story library in downtown Wilmington, and I was in my glory. Just the smell of the different floors when you got to the older books, and the just like I can still conjure it up in my brain, just the feel of all the ladders and the librarians that would, or the staff members, or I don't know, but they would climb the ladders and then they'd be magically floating down walls of heavenly books. It just, anyway, though, in school, though, I remember the librarian, I was checking out a book, Harold and the Purple Crayon, which is still my favorite kids book of all time. And I was checking it out, and she looked at the card, and it was my name on the entire. I mean, back in the day, it was cards in the back of the book, and I don't know if they still do it that way, but it was my name all front and all back. And she said, we need to allow other children to check this book out. My comment back to her was, for how long? For how long? But I grew up in there wasn't extra money to just go buy my own copy of this book.
Yeah.
And the librarian was so sweet and so kind to me. And once she realized no one else was checking out this book, she allowed me to check it out every single week for the entire school year. And I do own the entire series of Harold and the Purple Crayon now, and I read them myself. There was just something magical about Harold drawing everything with his crayon, and then it became real. But the compassion of every single librarian I have ever met in my school libraries and the public libraries. And when I go someplace new, I love to go to libraries. We have a vacation coming up, and I chose this place in Massachusetts because this resort has a massive library. I just know I'm going to spend time there. So what you are going into absolutely fascinates me. And knowing you and your personality, I just can't wait to see the effect that you have on our libraries and how you will revive them and allow people to see for all times of their lives how important it is.
It's such a valuable part of our society that I feel like is not being used to its
Yes.
potential.
Oh, for sure.
That people just view it as an old-fashioned institution.
Yes.
But
Yes. And now we have the internet and we have Kindle, and so we don't need a library anymore.
but there's so many things that you can get from your library. And I think those of us that with a lot of financial security, we forget that Audible is expensive.
Yes.
So I can get an app called Libby and I can listen to audiobooks from my library. You
See, now
know,
I didn't know that.
oh yeah, oh Libby is so cool. It is so cool. So you link your library card to it, and then you can actually download ebooks and read them on your Kindle. And you can also listen to audiobooks too
No kidding.
through the library. Yeah. It's
Uh,
so neat. It's so
You
neat.
you just made my day.
I know. I mean, like you sometimes have to wait a bit for it, but
That's okay.
I'll wait. It's
Yeah.
all good.
It's another great lesson that we get to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
Another
there's
great-
yeah. And then there's also a lot I think it's called Canopy, where there's actually like streaming service that you can use through your library. So there's so many more things that are there that people don't even know that they are. So I think we need to do a better job marketing it and making people aware and the programs. Like there's so many good programs where if you have a kid and they just need, especially if you have a kid that has like unique interests or kind of nerdy and they're struggling a little bit with the social side of it, there's
Mhm.
a lot of programs that it's like, hey, are you interested in Dungeons and Dragons? Come and learn. And it's just at the library. Or it's,
Yeah.
hey, it's a reading group for 12 to 15. And,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it's a way for kids to kind of find their people,
Yes.
you know.
And you are the one to revive this. So I can't wait to see the ripple effects, Jeannie, of what you are doing, and the joy on your face of this new phase of your life is like it's palpable. Like you can touch it and feel the joy radiating out of you. I'm excited for you. And when is graduation?
I have another year and a half.
Okay. Not that
So,
long.
but hey, there will be a party. I will be walking because I'm actually going to Syracuse University so I can go to my commencement. So, yeah,
Nice.
it's happening.
I
Oh,
love it.
yeah, I was very thrilled when I got accepted there because they're ranked uh, eighth in the country for their library program.
Wow.
Hmm.
You go.
So I was like, and bless my dad. I was like, I got in. He's like, well, of course you got in. I was like, Pops, this was not a given. Like, thank you for believing in me.
I would second your dad's sentiments. Of course you did. Of course you did. When you carry the level of confidence you carry, that is what universities and jobs and people look for, because it pushes you forward so much further and so much faster, because you do have that, well, you have that drive in you, that desire to be the best you can possibly be at what you're doing, which is what I would love everyone to just really grasp hold of with this interview with you, which went way too fast, way too fast. Is that life is what you make of it, and when it's time to shift, you can jump into that shift without being afraid. Just embrace it. Embrace
Yeah.
it and be willing to shift if that's not the shift you actually wanted. Right? I mean, we get locked into thinking that we have to put these golden handcuffs on and stay forever, and we don't. And you've proven that beautifully. Beautifully. Any last words of wisdom?
Um, well, let's see. So, what kind of goes in with what you were just saying is my favorite quote.
Yes.
My favorite quote is by someone you probably would not expect me to say has my favorite quote. It's from Dwight D. Eisenhower,
Okay.
right? Unexpected. But
Unexpected.
he said that plans are worthless, but planning is everything.
Say that again.
Plans are worthless, but planning is everything.
I love that.
Hmm.
Will you take that quote into a journal prompt for us? We're going to take our questions out of order because that kind of goes into it.
So, journal quote prompt. Let's go with when your plans don't go according to plans, how do you pivot?
Oh, I love that. When your plans don't go according to plans, how do you pivot? I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tell us your Pow Pow shoes. What is your version of your Pow Pow shoes?
I think my Pow Pow shoes are just so. All right. Am I allowed to cuss?
Yes.
All right. I'm
You,
just making sure.
you get to be you.
All right. So my personal motto is make today your bitch. And that's
Mhm.
all about your attitude of going into something. And that's
Yes.
the power of I am going to make it work. If I have to change a plan, things are going to happen because I'm going to make this day my bitch and we're going to figure it out.
Yes.
And that's it. So like that's my, and I think that's part of why I love that quote so much, because I think the planning is important because you're thinking about different options. You are
Yeah.
understanding the whole thing. But when you actually get into actually doing it, you throw the plans out the window
Yeah.
and you just kind of, you figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything, right? Marie Forleo says everything is figure outable.
Yep.
Just, I think it was her mom who started it, but
Yeah.
that's the book. And that is what I see in you. I'm going to figure this out. I love that. Make today your bitch. That's awesome.
Yeah. So like that is my
exactly.
thing, is make today your bitch. And that works for big plans. That works for a day that you're really dreading.
Yes.
Where you're like, oh, it's going to be so hard. Or I actually came up with it with my mom because she was doing chemo. So I was her main primary during 4 years where she did treatment.
Wow.
And she'd be like, I don't want to go in and do it today. I don't want to do the thing. I was like, no. I'm like, we are going to make today our bitch. We're going to go and do the treatments, and then I'm going to get you a Slurpee, and then you're going to come home and take a nap. But we are making today our bitch.
I love it. I absolutely love that. I could actually cry. That's what that conjured up in me. Just that passion and that how amazing. Everyone going through a hard time needs a Jeannie by their side. For sure. For sure. Yeah. Actually, that's another name of a book that you could write. I'm just going to give you all these titles of books you can write when you're doing your master's degree. So we have 2. I'll make sure we keep these in a safe place. These are your titles. I love it. How can we get in touch with you, Jeannie?
So I am on Instagram with my Free Wishes is my handle on everything because of Jeannie.
Oh, yes.
Wishes, yep. And I'm also on the TikTok. I have a little thing for the tickety talk. I'll be honest. I waste way too much time on there. And yeah, you also can get me through Shenango Supply.
Awesome.
So, wonderful.
Fabulous. I will link all of those links in the show notes, either under the YouTube or in your podcast app, wherever you are listening and or watching, so that you can contact Jeannie with any questions and any comments you might have. But maybe the question is, okay, I've thought about this journal prompt. I don't really know how to pivot. I bet you Jeannie has words of wisdom, because she is the person who says, come on, we're going to your treatment and then I'll buy you a Slurpee and you can take a nap, but you are getting through this. That's the person. That is the person. So send your comments, your questions to Jeannie, put them under this YouTube video, leave them in the podcast app. I will make sure that she gets them, that she sees them, or better yet, just send them to her directly on the gram or the tickety talk, as she called it, or an email at Shenango Supply, which will all be linked right under this episode so that you can find them. Jeannie, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. This has been delightful. You are delightful. And I agree with everyone who says you just got to get in a room with Jeannie, because she's the best person ever.
Thank you so much. This has been really great. Thank you.
Thank you.